An orphanage. They bombed an orphanage, 25 miles west of Tehran, the city of Fardis, a newly built charity complex designed to house children with no parents. 2 dead, 5 wounded. The strike confirmed by Iranian state media hours ago. This is what this war has become. But here's the number that should stop everyone cold. 230. That's how many children Iranian state media reports have been killed since this war began 4 weeks ago. Another 1,800 injured. And the single deadliest attack? An elementary school in Minab, southern Iran, on the first day of the war. 168 children, 14 teachers, bombed during school hours on February 28th. The UN human rights chief is now demanding the White House publish an investigation into that strike. His words last week. The images of bombed-out classrooms and grieving parents showed clearly who pays the highest price for war, civilians with no power in the decisions that led to conflict. But here's where this story breaks apart. The Pentagon hasn't confirmed the orphanage strike. They haven't confirmed the school strike. American officials maintain they're hitting military targets with precision munitions. The fog of war is thick, and both sides have reasons to manipulate casualty figures. Iran benefits from civilian casualty narratives. Dead children generate international sympathy and pressure on Washington. The regime has every incentive to exaggerate, to stage, to maximize the propaganda value of every strike. American officials have suggested some reported sites were military facilities disguised as civilian infrastructure. But 230 dead children isn't a rounding error. 168 bodies in a school isn't a misidentification. Even if Iranian numbers are inflated by half, even if some strikes hit legitimate targets, the civilian toll is mounting in ways that threaten to delegitimize the entire campaign. Because here's what we know for certain. The UN is investigating. Human rights organizations are documenting. International opinion is shifting. And every image of a bombed orphanage, every photo of a destroyed classroom, every grieving parent on camera, it all accumulates into a narrative that may constrain American options more than any Iranian missile. Wars aren't just won on battlefields. They're won in the court of global opinion. And America may be losing that court. Stay with me. What you learn in the next 15 minutes will show you why civilian casualties may determine how this war ends, and who history holds responsible. Welcome back to Warnomics. Before we break down the civilian casualty mathematics, why both sides manipulate these numbers, and what the international response means for American strategy, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell right now. This is the dimension of war that changes everything. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why dead children may matter more than destroyed bases. To understand why civilian casualties represent a strategic crisis, not just a moral one, you need to grasp how modern wars are constrained by legitimacy, and why that legitimacy is eroding rapidly. American military doctrine emphasizes precision. The entire premise of modern American warfare is that we can hit what we aim at and avoid what we don't. Laser-guided munitions, GPS-guided bombs, intelligence-driven targeting. The promise is surgical strikes that destroy military capability while minimizing civilian harm. This doctrine emerged from Vietnam, where indiscriminate bombing generated domestic opposition that ultimately ended the war. The lesson learned: American public will tolerate wars only if civilian casualties remain limited and clearly unintentional. But precision has limits. No targeting system is perfect. Intelligence is sometimes wrong. Buildings identified as military installations may house civilians. Schools may be misidentified as command centers. Orphanages may appear on targeting lists through errors in the kill chain. The question isn't whether mistakes happen. They always do. The question is how many mistakes, how often, and whether the pattern suggests carelessness or policy. Iranian state media reports 230 children killed in 4 weeks. That's approximately 8 children per day, every day since the war began. If accurate, this represents a casualty rate that exceeds any American military operation since Vietnam. If even partially accurate, it suggests targeting processes are failing at scale. Now let's understand Iran's information strategy. Tehran understands that Western audiences respond to civilian casualties. Dead children generate news coverage, diplomatic pressure, and domestic opposition in the United States. Iran has every incentive to maximize reported casualties, to ensure cameras capture destruction, to parade grieving families before international media. This doesn't mean casualties are fabricated, but it means reported numbers should be viewed skeptically. Some civilian sites may have hosted military equipment. Some casualties may have been combatants. Some numbers may be inflated. The fog of war benefits those who manipulate it most effectively. But skepticism cuts both ways. The Pentagon's silence on specific incidents is telling. And when pressed about the Minab school strike, officials have neither confirmed nor denied. They've offered no evidence the school was a military facility. They've provided no alternative casualty figures. Silence in the face of 168 dead children suggests either genuine uncertainty about what happened or awareness that the truth is indefensible. The international legal framework matters here. The laws of armed conflict require distinction between military and civilian targets, proportionality between military advantage and civilian harm, and precaution to minimize casualties. Striking an orphanage, if confirmed as deliberate, would constitute a war crime. Striking a school full of children, if the military value didn't justify the civilian cost, would violate proportionality requirements. These aren't abstract legal theories. They're the basis for potential prosecutions, sanctions, and permanent stains on American reputation. Let's examine the specific incidents that are generating international condemnation and what they reveal about the war's trajectory. The Manab school strike occurred on February 28th, day one of the war. According to Iranian media, 168 children and 14 teachers died when American munitions hit an elementary school during morning classes. If accurate, this single incident killed more civilians than any American strike since the 2017 Mosul attack that killed over 100 in a single building. The UN Human Rights Chief has called for a full investigation. His statement to the Human Rights Council was unusually direct. Bombed out classrooms and grieving parents paying the highest price for war. This language signals the UN is treating the incident as a potential war crime requiring accountability. The Pentagon has not responded substantively. No claim that the school was misidentified. No assertion that military targets were present. No casualty figures of their own. The silence is deafening, and it's being interpreted internationally as tacit acknowledgement that something went terribly wrong. The Fardis orphanage strike occurred yesterday. 2 dead, 5 wounded, at a newly built charity complex housing children without parents. Iranian media emphasized the facility was clearly marked as civilian, recently constructed, and had no military function. The location, 25 miles west of Tehran, places it in the expanded target zone as American strikes have moved closer to the capital. What's significant about this strike is timing. It occurred after weeks of international criticism about civilian casualties, after the UN demanded investigations, after human rights organizations documented patterns of harm. Either American targeting processes have not adapted to the criticism, or civilian sites are being struck despite awareness of the consequences. Rights groups have specifically condemned the targeting of educational establishments and residential areas. This language suggests they're seeing patterns, not isolated incidents. When organizations like Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International identify patterns, legal consequences often follow. War crimes, tribunals, individual accountability, permanent documentation that follows officials for decades. Meanwhile, Iran scored a significant military success. The IRGC confirmed the death of Revolutionary Guard Navy Commander Alireza Tangsiri, 4 days after Israel announced the kill. Tangsiri was instrumental in mining and blockading the Strait of Hormuz. He was increasingly vocal and visible since the war began, and a key figure behind the near-total closure of the waterway. His death represents genuine military achievement, the elimination of a high-value target directly responsible for economic damage to the global economy. But the IRGC's response was telling. They said the organization is accustomed to such losses, and stressed that the Navy continues delivering strikes and managing the strait despite Tangsiri's death. The message, killing commanders doesn't stop operations. Leadership is replaceable. The mission continues. This suggests decapitation strikes, while symbolically significant, may not be degrading Iranian capability as much as Washington hopes. The war is producing results on both sides. American strikes kill Iranian commanders and destroy infrastructure. Iranian missiles reach Israeli refineries. Debris from an intercepted attack directly hit a tanker at Haifa's oil refinery complex, causing fires visible for miles. Both sides are bleeding, neither is collapsing. Let's examine the mathematics of civilian casualties, and why the numbers may determine the war's outcome more than military metrics. Iranian state media claims 230 children killed, 800 children injured. If accurate, that's approximately 8 children killed and 64 injured every day for 29 days. These numbers would represent one of the highest child casualty rates in any modern American military operation. For comparison, the entire 2003 Iraq invasion produced approximately 7,300 civilian deaths over 3 weeks of major combat, but against a defending military of 400,000. This campaign is producing comparable casualty rates against a country that cannot effectively defend its airspace. But let's apply skepticism. Iranian media is state-controlled. Casualty figures serve propaganda purposes. Assume 50% inflation, that still yields on 115 children killed and 900 injured in 4 weeks. Assume 75% inflation, still 58 dead children and 450 injured. Even the most skeptical interpretation produces casualty figures that generate international condemnation. The Manab school strike allegedly killed 168 children in a single incident. For context, the deadliest single American airstrike in the Iraq War killed approximately 105 civilians in Mosul in 2017, an incident that generated congressional hearings and military investigations. If Manab's toll is accurate, it exceeds that by 60%. If even half accurate, 84 dead children. It remains catastrophic. The strategic mathematics of civilian casualties operate differently than military mathematics. Dead soldiers degrade military capability. Dead civilians degrade political legitimacy. Political legitimacy constrains military options. Every dead child photographed in bombed rubble becomes ammunition for Iran's information war, for diplomatic pressure, for domestic opposition in America. American public opinion on wars correlates strongly with perceived legitimacy and civilian harm. Vietnam collapsed politically when casualty images dominated television. Iraq's support eroded as civilian deaths mounted. This war's images, orphanages, schools, children's bodies, are circulating globally. TikTok, Twitter, Al Jazeera, state media worldwide. The narrative is forming. America is killing children. The financial mathematics matter too. Haifa's oil refinery complex has now been struck twice, once directly by Iranian missiles, now by debris from an intercepted attack that directly hit a tanker. Each strike on energy infrastructure drives prices higher. Brent crude is on track for its largest monthly increase in history. The economic pain spreads globally, while casualty images concentrate on Iran. This asymmetry, economic damage globally, civilian casualties locally, shapes international responses. Countries suffering high energy prices might tolerate American action if it seemed measured and precise. Countries seeing bombed orphanages start questioning whether the cure is worse than the disease. The implications of mounting civilian casualties extend across diplomatic, legal, and strategic dimensions. The UN Human Rights Council meeting represents institutional response. When the High Commissioner for Human Rights demands investigations, bureaucratic machinery activates. Fact-finding missions, documentation, reports that enter permanent record. Even if no immediate consequences follow, the documentation creates basis for future accountability. War crimes have no statute of limitations. Officials involved in targeting decisions may face scrutiny for decades. International coalition support may erode. The United Kingdom, France, Germany, and other allies have supported American action publicly, but domestic politics in those countries respond to civilian casualty images. European publics are historically less tolerant of civilian harm than American audiences. If allied governments face domestic pressure, their support may become conditional, quiet, or withdrawn entirely. Regional dynamics shift as casualties mount. Gulf states weighing entry into the war must consider that joining the American side means association with bombed orphanages and dead children. Saudi Arabia and UAE have domestic audiences too. Images of Arab-looking children killed by American bombs resonate differently in Riyadh than in Washington. Iranian domestic politics complicate further. The regime can use civilian casualties to rally nationalist sentiment. Populations that might otherwise oppose the government unite against foreign attackers killing their children. Whatever hope existed for internal pressure on the regime diminishes with every strike on civilian infrastructure. Legal exposure accumulates. The International Criminal Court has jurisdiction over war crimes regardless of whether states accept it. Individual commanders, officials, and decision-makers can face indictment. The United States isn't a member of the ICC, but American officials traveling internationally could face arrest warrants. This happened with Israeli officials after Gaza operations. It could happen with American officials after Iran. The information war may already be lost. Regardless of actual casualty numbers, the perception is setting. Orphanages, schools, children. These images are the ones that last, that define conflicts in historical memory. America bombed an orphanage becomes the sentence that summarizes this war, whether or not the full context justifies the action. American options for addressing the civilian casualty crisis range from transparency to denial. Full transparency would mean publishing targeting data, acknowledging mistakes, and demonstrating that procedures exist to minimize harm. This approach risks confirming some Iranian claims, but establishes credibility for disputed incidents. The Pentagon has historically resisted transparency, preferring ambiguity that avoids accountability. Adjusted targeting protocols would mean raising the threshold for strikes near civilian infrastructure, requiring additional verification before hitting schools or hospitals, and accepting some military targets will go unstruck. This reduces civilian casualties, but potentially extends the war and allows Iranian military recovery. Information warfare counteroffensive would mean producing evidence that specific civilian sites were military, demonstrating Iranian manipulation of casualty figures and contesting the narrative aggressively. This requires intelligence disclosure that may compromise sources and methods. Diplomatic engagement with critics would mean working with UN investigators, cooperating with human rights organizations, and demonstrating good faith on accountability. This accepts short-term criticism for potential long-term legitimacy. Continued silence is also an option. Maintain current approach, accept international criticism, rely on military success to ultimately justify civilian costs. This strategy assumes victory solves everything. History suggests otherwise. For those of us watching from home, orphanages and schools feel different than military bases and command centers. These aren't abstract strategic assets. These are children. Whatever your position on this war, whether you believe American action is justified, whether you trust Iranian casualty figures, whether you think the ends justify the means, the images matter. The dead children matter, not because they change military calculations, but because they change us. They change how we see our country. They change how the world sees us. They change what this war means and how it will be remembered. The honest answer, some of what Iran claims may be exaggerated or false. Some of what America claims may be true. But somewhere in between, real children are really dying. That reality doesn't care about propaganda or information warfare. It just is. Civilian casualties may determine this war's legacy more than any military victory. Warnomics will continue tracking what's happening and what it means. If this analysis helped you understand why bombed orphanages matter strategically as well as morally, share this video with someone who needs context beyond the headlines. Drop a comment below. Do you trust Iranian casualty figures? Should the US prioritize minimizing civilian harm even if it extends the war? Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell, because the intersection of military action and civilian cost will shape everything that comes next. This is Warnomics. Stay informed, stay human. See you in the next one.